Hi, I'm Randy Nelson. I'm the off-road technical trainer for Polaris Industries, and today I'm going to show you how to install these rock sliders on this Polaris RS1. Before we begin, we want to make sure we read these instructions and check to make sure all parts and tools are accounted for. We want to make sure we retain these instructions for future reference and parts ordering information. If you plan on installing the rock sliders with the fender flare kit, you will need to cut the fender flares, the front fender flares. There's a little mold piece here. It needs to be cut out. What you can start out by using is a 2.5-inch hole saw. There's already a dimple in the plastic here, so we could drill this out and then take some type of cutting utensil and then cut the rest of this out. So when this is installed in the vehicle, this tube here is going to insert into that slot onto the vehicle and the fender flare will be put into position. So we'll show you how that looks once we get it installed. So to continue on with the rock slider installation, we need to remove the outer panel of the vehicle, this skin here, and we also got to remove the right rear fender and also the left rear fender when we do the installation on the other side of the vehicle. Firstly, we need to remove the fender before we can remove the panel on the vehicle. So to start off with, we're just going to loosen up the quarter turn. So give that a quarter turn, and then there's two bungee cords, one in the front here and one on the rear of the vehicle. Once that's removed, we can kind of lift up a little bit and outward, and it comes on latch. There's two locking tabs right here in the bottom. So, and we'll remove the fender from the vehicle and set it aside. And then to remove the skin of the vehicle here, there's going to be a total of 7 T40 fasteners. 2 are located right here. The remaining 5 are on the inside of the machine. And you want to make sure you kind of keep your body into this panel because once those screws are removed, the panel could fall off the vehicle. So once those screws are removed, you can just slide the panel off and remove it from the vehicle and set it aside. So on the side of the vehicle, on the rocker plastic down here, you're going to have two kind of templates, almost look like knockouts. They're not knockouts, but we actually need to cut this area out. What's important here is that you're not cutting on this line. So we're actually going to be using an 1 3/4 hole saw, and we're going to cut it out. As you can see, it's actually going to be smaller than that outline on the vehicle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place the hole saw in the position here that's kind of in the center of that knockout. And we're just going to mark the inside with a marker. That way we kind of have a starting point for our drill bit. Otherwise, we're going to go in blindly with the drill bit and the hole saw. So I'll go ahead and chuck this hole saw up. And then we'll go ahead and drill the hole out. And we want to make sure we're looking beside on the back side here. Make sure there's nothing there that we're going to cut out or hit. And we're going to be okay, it looks like. So we're just going to break the surface here. And that's all you're going to do is go that far in, because there's actually a piece of plastic back there that jogs that way that's going to direct the tube of your rock slider in that direction. So we'll back out. So once the hole is drilled, what we're going to want to do is cut the excess material to the line. What we don't want to do is use a hole saw the same size as the outer line, because we will actually get this inner piece of plastic. So now we're just going to use a utility knife or a deburring tool and just cut off the excess right to that outer edge. And then we'll repeat the process on the front hole. So we're installing the rock slider onto the vehicle after our holes have been cut. You're going to make sure you got the 3 bolt and washers. So the washer is going to go underneath the bolt head. And these are going to go in the tubes on the end once we get the rock slider installed onto the vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and insert this into the hole on the front, and then there's already a cutout from the factory on the bottom peg here. So we'll get that into position. If you have a little issues getting the rock slider tube in the rear, you may have to take a utility knife or a deburring tool and just slightly auger that hole out a little larger. That way that tube will slide right in. So with the rock slider in place, we're going to install the fastener on the inside here. It's got to go through the frame. Just kind of give you a reference here. I'm just going to lay the bolt in there. And that bolt's going to come through the frame and it's going to screw into the tube here and see if everything lines up. And mine does not line up. So to get a little more movement, we're going to remove the body fastener on this lower piece of plastic, which is the rocker. We're going to remove that, but you need to be careful when you remove this. This plastic's going to tip out, so that rock slider may fall down. So you're going to want to support the rock slider and then remove the screw. And then grab your bolt again with the washer and then come back on the inside and then line up your holes and get that screw or bolt started on the inside, which it is. And then we'll go ahead and reinstall the T40 fastener back into the plastic. That'll just aid in kind of keeping everything kind of tight against the body. And then we'll continue on installing the remaining 2 fasteners on the front and the middle of the rock slider. So the front portion of the rock slider, same fastener style, same washer. We're just going to come from the inside, and we just need to make sure we're going through the frame. You're not going to be able to see it here on the camera because it's behind the plastic. We're just going to go ahead and get that started. And we're started right now. You can just thread it in with your hand. And then we just have the center one to install, and then we can come back and torque everything down, the specifications with the 13mm socket. So the last fastener is the center one, so that one's going to come through the frame. So we're going to go ahead and install that. You may have to lift up a little bit on the rock slider just to get the hole to line up and the threads to be started. But that's going to be okay because the front and rear are still loose at this time. So we'll go ahead and get in there. Okay, so it's in there. So what we're going to do now is we'll go back and we'll tighten up the front and the rear and the center to specifications, and then we'll just repeat the process on the other side. There's one additional step on the left side of the vehicle that I have to show you, how to install the front rock slider bolt, but we'll show you that here next. So on the left side of the vehicle, before we can install the rock slider, there's a plastic plug on the inside. This plug actually needs to be removed from the body, and just getting a flat blade screwdriver and getting behind the plug and kind of prying it out. And that'll give us access to this hole, and that's where our fastener is going to go through to screw into our front mount on our rock slider. So I'm going to go ahead and install the plastic back on the side of the vehicle. Just make sure that you get the little tab here into the body of the vehicle first, and then kind of pivot the body back into position. You do want to make sure that your inner plastic is locking into the seam here, so you need to make sure that all fits nice and tight all the way down. If that looks good, then we can begin installing our 7 T40 fasteners and our 2 plastic rivets on the inside. So we'll just get these started, and then we'll go ahead and install the rest of them on the inside and make sure this gap is equal. So install the rear fender assembly here. So I've got to make sure that these 2 tabs on the fender assembly latch into the spot on the body itself. So that's the first part we're going to want to do. Make sure those are lined up. And once those are in, we'll get the body plastic lined up, just like that. And then we'll get our quarter turn. And then we'll get our 2 straps, the one in the front and the one on the rear. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall the fender flares back onto the vehicle. So here's the notch we cut out for the rock slider tube. We're going to go ahead and slide that into position, line everything up, and then we'll go ahead and reinstall our fasteners back into the fender flares. Make sure you install the long push rivets in the proper location.